All right, so the past year or so, Candace Owens has been very outspoken against Israel, and it's caused a lot of controversy. Some people think she's finally waking up to all the corruption and she's doing the right thing by calling it out. Then others think she's just out of her mind. And some people are even reporting her and asking why she isn't banned on YouTube or Twitter, which I think is kind of ridiculous. I mean, if you're pro free speech, I think you should let her say whatever she wants as long as she's not inciting violence or anything like that. But obviously, she hasn't done that. So if you disagree with her, I think the best option is just to respond and try to correct her or debate her. And personally, I really don't know much about the Middle East and Israel, so I couldn't tell you what she's right or wrong about. And I don't really care enough to defend or support her. Even though at the time when she got fired from Daily Wire, I thought that was kind of ridiculous. And I talked about it on Patreon. And I also talked about her beef with Rabbi Shmuley. And I took her side in that because that dude was just out of his mind. So since then, I've been kind of keeping up with her, but recently I listened to the interviews she did with the Tate brothers, and it led me down a crazy rabbit hole that I'm going to try my best to explain throughout this video. And I'm sure some people, when they just heard that, are like, oh no, is this going to be some crazy anti-Semitic Jewish conspiracy theory rabbit hole that he got sucked into? But it has nothing to do with that, and it's more about Candace Owens and her relationship with the Tate brothers. So before I get into it, I just want to play this clip from her interview. And she was talking a lot about how pretty much everybody in power is a degenerate pedophile that's been compromised by Israel. And Israel uses that as dirt to try to blackmail them so they can control them and have power over them.
But I just didn't like how many times I kept finding in the history of Israel and in the president of Israel defense for pedophiles. It just didn't work for me. Like, that Zionists were so hardcore about Israel, were defending pedophilia. And when you can then trace that, and it's funny you talk about the streets, these were people that were weapons dealers and drug dealers that then started Hollywood, right? Yeah. They started Hollywood. Charlie Chaplin, who was under one of their thumbs. And we know that a lot of these people in our government are being blackmailed. I wonder why. I personally want to hear my conspiracy theorist. I think pornography websites are basically, they're able to figure out what your demented interests are. So these people, they're making you more and more perverse, more and more perverse. Suddenly you're watching some weird stuff, and then they got you watching some 12-year-old girl, whatever it is. Boom, you're under their control. And I think this is what Jeffrey Epstein, all of this stuff is about, getting men who would be in positions of power to acquiesce to some pornography, and then they're under their control. I really believe that. Of the most extreme form of blackmail, which is if we know that you have engaged in pedophilia, that you've been involved in any of these weird sexual scenarios, we can control you in office.
So when I heard Candace talking about all this, I just thought it was kind of ironic she'd be saying all this to Andrew Tate, of all people. I'm like, why does she have him on her podcast? Why would she want to be friends with him? I mean, she's talking about how bad adult content is and how the people that produce it use it to get people into some sick stuff, which eventually leads to them doing something with a child or doing something illegal. And then they use that as blackmail to control them. And I was just thinking, okay, if that theory is true, couldn't we apply that to Andrew Tate, who's known for making pornography? I mean, that's how he made all his money. And some of his old tweets, like back around 2019, 2020, this guy was completely unhinged. He would tweet stuff like, I made corn, I made so much of it, I made millions. You consume it, I am God, you are a loser. He'd also say, I super hope everybody gets addicted to it and it ruins everybody's lives. I hope everybody suffers. I don't want to help at all. Keep watching the cam girls. I want more money. I hope you're miserable and unhappy. And people keep telling me making it is bad, it's a sin, haram, what you're doing is illegal. Maybe, I don't care. I will F your Christian and Muslim girls in one of my supercars and in one of my mansions. Then I put them on a webcam. Keep your legality, God, Allah. You're broke, sad, lonely, and dumb. So I was thinking, why would Candace want to be around somebody like this? I mean, even if these tweets are 4 or 5 years ago, if you're going to be calling everybody degenerates and try to call out how bad adult content is and everything, doing it with Andrew and Tristan Tate probably isn't the best idea. But then I started to put the pieces together, and I realized Candace actually met Tate around this time, like when he's putting out tweets like this is when they first met. And she met him through her husband, who had already been good friends with Tate, and he said they go way back, and he said he knows Tate really well. And if you're not familiar with her husband, George Farmer, he's a British aristocrat. Like, his dad's a British lord, and his family's worth a ton of money, and he apparently inherited like $70 million.
Interviewed Andrew Tate.
Long time.
I know, it's been a very long time.
You've known Andrew Tate for a number of years. You were just with him for that interview.
Yeah, I've known Andrew for many, many years. I've known Andrew since before Andrew was Andrew. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I've known Andrew since before he was famous, I guess. Andrew is a great guy. He really is, and he's a wonderful guy in many ways. Like all humans, he's flawed.
As I was having this dinner with my husband and his friend, Andrew Tate was there. I had no idea who he was. This is kind of before he really took off on the internet. I had my assistant at the time with me, who happened to be Romanian. She's born in Romania, speaks Romanian, happened to have been in the United States. She spent a lot of the time that we were there talking to him. She comes over to me afterwards and she says, this guy, Andrew Tate, I think he's a pimp in Romania.
I used sex as a tool to make women love me so they'd obey me and live in my house and make me money. That's what I wanted. So I was a pimp in that sense.
I said, what? And she's like, no, I think he's like actually a pimp in Romania.
By taking girls who didn't know how to be effective on webcam, girls who had never done webcam before, girls who didn't have the equipment, didn't have the know-how, didn't have the will, didn't have the premises, didn't have the ability to make money with this exchange.
Off camera, I think he'll be the first person to admit that. Like, he's a flawed human being.
I created a system that allowed me to convince girls to do this, allowed me to retain 100% control of their income. I know how to make sure the girl can't run away.
I know Andrew pretty well, and like, you know, as I said, I know that he's full of flaws.
And obviously Andrew claims he's changed now and he's a better person. But I mean, back then, which wasn't that long ago, you know, I think just 4 or 5 years ago, he was clearly a terrible, awful human being. There's no way around it. And you'd wonder why somebody like Candace's husband would want to be friends with somebody like that. And I'm not saying this is the reason, but one time on Twitter, Andrew explained why people really wanted to be friends with him. And he said, everybody wants to be friends with the pimp. Doubt me? Epstein had access to pussy. Look at his friends list. It's basic human psychology. I have the assets every man who's not a hater wishes they had, and the next best thing to being me is knowing me. And if you remember when Tate first got arrested, everybody started comparing him to Epstein. And you would think, like, yeah, it's just people that hate him. Of course they're going to do that. But it was actually people on the right that were making that comparison to try to defend him, kind of. You know, people are like, Andrew Tate got arrested before any of Epstein's clients. Let that sink in. And whether Andrew Tate is guilty or not, they skip the entire Epstein client list because he's their enemy and the people on that list aren't. And the media is distracting us with Andrew Tate, so a lawsuit against JP Morgan for aiding Epstein's trafficking can fly under the radar. And I'm not saying any of these people are involved with Tate at all, but I think it's just funny they're saying this because it actually sounds like they're using Epstein to distract from Tate. And then also, if you get arrested and everybody's like, yeah, well, what about Epstein? What does that say? You know, that is not a good look, especially if you consider Tristan Tate is being accused of trafficking a minor, and Andrew has professed his love for very young girls openly many times.
You said it looks like I'm in a teenage girl's bedroom.
Yeah.
To some people, that would be an insult, but to me, I find that quite flattering, to be honest. You know, like, that's exactly what you'd expect. Like.
I'm fucking all these 16-year-old women or 18-year-old women, whatever the law is in America. 18?
It's 18 usually. You get married at 16. I think.
All right, in Romania, it's 16. Sorry.
And I only get away with that because the girl of 6 years plays along. So Vivian's been with me 6 years.
So he's been with Vivian for 6 years, right?
Because Vivian's younger. Melissa's like 28. Vivian's like 21.
Vivian's 21, and at this point, he's been a girlfriend for 6 years. It means that they met when she was 15 years old.
Because Vivian's younger.
This away from me. No, I want a virgin wife at 16 who's going to obey me. That's what I want.
I was contacted by Andrew Tate, the older of the Tate brothers, 3 years ago when I was just 16.
So I messaged her. She's like, I'm only 16. I was like, give a fuck. Know about me. I'm 21. I don't care.
And before I go any further, I've been getting a lot of these clips and tweets that I'm using in this video from Murdered by Crayons and Milk Bar TV on Twitter. They cover a lot of the Tate stuff and they do a good job. So if you want to keep up with that, make sure you check them out. So going back to Candace's theory in the beginning about how people who produce adult content want you to keep getting into weirder and weirder stuff. So eventually you're doing something illegal. And if they have that dirt on you, then they own you. You know, you're under their thumb and they basically have control over you. So I don't know why you couldn't apply that theory to Andrew Tate, who's known for making adult content, who's compared himself to Jeffrey Epstein, who is obsessed with money, power, and influence, and has had access to some high profile people like Candace's husband. You know, so if you apply that here, it makes you think maybe he made sure to get some dirt on her husband. I mean, I'm sure Tate is always thinking 2 steps ahead, and we've seen this with P. Diddy and Epstein and situations like that. Like, if you're going to have high profile clients, you're going to make sure to get some dirt on them, because then if you go down, they go down as well. And then this would explain why Candace is suspiciously overly defensive of the Tates. because it's like she's defending her husband as well. And, you know, it makes you wonder. I mean, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but I'm just asking questions. You know, like, why was Candace defending a registered sex offender on her podcast who was convicted of abusing 2 young girls? To me, that's just kind of strange, especially considering how outspoken she is about this issue. So she did this when she was talking about one of Tate's alleged victims. She did an 1.5-hour podcast, basically just trying to discredit them. And one of the girls who was accusing Tate was also the victim in a few other cases. And one in which was when she was 15. Her and another girl were abused by a yoga instructor, and he was sentenced to 24 years. You know, he was convicted. But Candace and the Tates try to act like this guy was set up because the girl allegedly lied about her age, which, even if that's true, is still illegal. But Candace tries to defend him and act like this girl can't be trusted because she lies about her age, which is insane to say about a 15-year-old. And what's even crazier is Candace refuses to say the predator's name out of respect for him, I guess, because she says the victim's name like 100 times throughout this podcast and goes into all this personal information about her. But then when it comes to the she's like, I want to do the right thing. I want to be ethical. Since this case involves a minor, I'm not going to say his name at all. But yet she says the name of the minor like 100 times. And Candace starts by reading this statement from the Tates where they claim the girl's the predator because she has a history of getting in relationships with men in order to take advantage of them and extort them. And to prove that, she talks about the girl getting abused by the yoga instructor, Keith Fox. And she claims that he was pretty much taken advantage of because a 15-year-old girl might have lied about her age and tricked him into having sex with her. Like, Candace literally refers to him as a victim of hers and says that she ruined his life with these accusations.
According to them, again, if you want to take their word for it, Abby is a predator who has a long history of baiting men into sexual relationships for the specific purpose of destroying their lives. She has a chain of victims going back several years to when she was a minor. Her modus operandi is as follows. She devises sophisticated narratives to elicit compassion and sexual attraction from unsuspecting men. She uses these men as hosts, taking what she wants for personal, emotional, and economic gain. A serial extortionist and blackmailer who preys on successful men. On multiple occasions, she has accused innocent men of horrific crimes, resulting in their unjust incarceration. The case involves a man who I am not going to name, and the only reason I'm not going to name him is because at the time of the allegations against him, Emma was in fact a minor, and that, of course, is relevant. So we just want to be ethical here and not expose his name so that people can look up the case because, as I said, she was underage at the time. Essentially, it was believed that she was having sexual relations with him, and the courts found that to be true, and he is now been sentenced to 24 years in prison. Why is that relevant? Because since then, people are alleging, which we are going to get to, that she lied about her age and that she lies about her age repeatedly. And though, despite the fact that he is perhaps not a moral man, he did fall victim to her lying. Throughout this episode, by the way, you're going to hear some beeps when I'm discussing this case. If I accidentally say his name, we intend to just beep it out. Again, just to protect the fact that she was, in fact, a minor at the time of these accusations. To suspect that she was lying about her age. Now, remember, is serving a prison sentence. His life has pretty much been destroyed here. They believe, the Tate brothers believe, that was induced into an illicit sexual relationship with a minor under false pretenses. According to Marlon Fisher, performed deviant sexual acts in the bedroom, such as urinating on her during intercourse.
Yeah, so Candace Owens is a class act, you know, defending and protecting a pedophile. I mean, that is disgusting. Even for her, that's low. I mean, her and the Tates are acting like this 60-year-old man is the victim and not the 15-year-old girl he was pissing on. You know, that is just psychotic. But that shows how far she'll go to defend the Tates, which is a little suspicious to me. I mean, she also has a picture of Andrew and her husband in her home office. So those two are really close. And knowing that, if you go listen to the interviews they do, it seems like she's just trying to help the Tates do PR and do damage control. Like, around the time they first got arrested, she interviewed Andrew, and it was clearly her just trying to help Andrew clear his name. she acted like, oh, I'm just trying to get to the bottom of things. I'm being objective here. But it is clearly just a puff piece to try to make Andrew look good. And they both kept acting like everything Andrew did was over 10 years ago. Like they said that a billion times. They're like, if you took anything I did 10 years ago, it's going to look bad. But a lot of the stuff was way more recent than that. And according to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the Tates were receiving income from their webcam services up until August of 2022. So if he wasn't being honest about that, why would I trust anything he has to say? Also he's acting like it wasn't that bad what he's doing. So why not just be open and honest about it? And of course, Candace doesn't question anything and goes along with it, even though she had to know he was full of shit. I mean, when she met him in 2019, she had a pretty good idea of what he was doing. Her assistant told her that she thought he was a pimp. So it definitely seems like she's just helping them do PR. And I wouldn't be surprised if she was given notes or a script or something. I mean, she clearly is going to do whatever they tell her to, which, again, makes you wonder why. And then you go back to the beginning and what she said, and it all starts to make sense a little bit.
First person in the world by people who pretended they'd never done anything wrong for the last 10 years.
Look what he said 10 years ago.
So this video is from 10 years ago.
Looking back 10 years.
When you talk about Candace from 10 years ago.
Fortunately, I had no cameras in my face 10 years ago.
The idea that you did something 10 years ago.
Okay, this is 10 years ago.
I'll talk about these things from 10 years ago.
Again, if you found Candace 10 years ago, that 10 years ago, from 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said this 10 years ago.
Things from 10 years ago that.
Because of things that you said 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago.
Like, okay, 10 years ago, 10 years, a decade.
For 4 years, I ran a webcam studio, which people find very interesting. I had naked girls sitting on the internet talking to guys.
So you don't, do you do that still?
I have 3 girls who still work for me.
The cam business is it's still going because my most loyal girls will never leave me. That's why it's going.
If you look at anybody who made things 10 years ago, something's going to be stupid.
Currently filming this during the COVID pandemic. You may be watching this later on, but right now during the pandemic, for the last 2 to 3 years, I've been making money on OnlyFans from its inception all the way up till now.
Those old clips, my webcam company, things that happened 10 years ago.
Yeah, so Candace and Andrew both know they're lying about this, but of course they're doing it because they need to downplay it since it looks terrible. And this is what Candace has to say about people who lie about stuff like this.
We were specifically told an angle, and that angle has been protected for a very long time for a reason that must be evil, because lies can only be served to protect evil.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and I think that's what's going on here. I mean, if you listen to her interviews with the Tates, it all just sounds like projection. I mean, it's almost comical. Like, half her podcast with Andrew was them talking about how everybody is a gay pedophile, and then in her interview with Tristan, she has the audacity to say this.
What's actually funny is that everything that they accuse people of doing is what they are.
Oh.
And this gets into,
Oh,
I need to do a
absolutely.
full episode on this, but like the media is literally an ecosystem that was built to protect pedophiles.
Yes.
Right. And
I mean, this is unbelievable. Like, she's literally explaining what she's doing. People obviously wouldn't consider her part of the media or like mainstream media, but she works in media for sure. And what is she doing, or what did she do in that clip I played earlier? She was literally trying to protect a pedophile by censoring his name and trying to make him seem like the victim. So she is just projecting like crazy. I mean, go listen to those interviews after you watch this video. Like, also she's talking about how everybody's gay. Like, everybody to her is a gay pedophile. And again, that seems like something she's projecting, because when I was looking into her husband, I heard quite a few rumors he was allegedly a closeted homosexual, and he was actually accused of essaying a former Breitbart editor. And when the editor brought this up, Candace blocked him. And Candace once said, most people that lie for a living block people that expose them. So again, you can apply what she's saying to herself. And then also somebody asked this guy who accused her husband, they said, why would Candace marry somebody who's pretending? It doesn't seem like her. And he said, yes, I wonder why a perennial grifter, Candace Owens, would want to marry into the family of a wealthy British lord. Very difficult to figure out. Yeah, and also her and her husband got engaged after only 17 days of knowing each other. And when he was describing it, he said nothing romantic was even said before they got engaged.
It was very difficult to describe. Nothing romantic was said, between that day and the day that we got engaged. Nothing romantic was said at all. There was no overtures. Like, we didn't go for dinner. Like, we didn't take it. Nothing.
Send her flowers.
No, nothing. Yeah, nothing. Exactly. And so I was very clear about that, because it it was almost like getting to know oneself in some ways. It was kind of a very strange experience. It was like I saw myself in her, and I kind of I was very willing to let myself fade and give glory to her. That's how I view our marriage in many ways. Like I'm very happy to take a secondary position to give glory to her. I'm far less politically involved now than I was because she's much more politically involved than I ever could be.
Yeah, so I think he's probably pulling some of the strings behind the scenes. Like also, if you remember, he was the CEO of Parler, that failed social media app. I don't know if it's even around anymore, but he was trying to pawn it off onto Kanye West, of course. I mean, Kanye is the easiest person ever to take advantage of. It's kind of sad. I mean, just look at the people around him. And also, if you look into what his dentist is currently doing to him, that's a crazy story. But thankfully, his Parler deal fell through. But when it was first announced, everybody's like, damn, Kanye's got to be the easiest celebrity to manipulate. And Candace Owens just ripped some money out of Ye's pocket. And George Farmer's out here laughing his way to the bank, having pawned off the dumbest investment ever on a highly suggestible, mentally ill man. And Candace finessed Kanye. So a lot of people felt like they're ripping him off. And if you remember, even Joe Rogan recognized Candace Owens was a grifter after only one podcast. That's all it took. And he's surrounded by grifters, so you don't have to be the best at it to trick him, but Candace couldn't even last one podcast. And now with this Tate stuff, she's really exposing herself. I think she just got way in over her head with this. And it seems like she might have surrounded herself with gay pedophiles and is now kind of losing it. I mean, go listen to her podcast with Andrew. The whole time they're ranting about how everybody's a homosexual. And again, that seems like projection because are we really supposed to believe that Andrew Tate isn't a deeply closeted homosexual? I mean, if you look into it, it's pretty obvious. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's plenty of evidence. First of all, for his business, he had a sex guys, which I guess he's doing for money. But either way, I mean, you can call me old fashioned, but in my opinion, that seems kind of gay. And then also, I'm just going to read some quotes from him and try to tell me this isn't somebody coping with the fact that they're a homosexual. He said, any man who has sex with a woman because it feels good is gay. And kissing a woman is actually a sign of homosexuality. And then also during the Candace Owens interview, he said he sits around thinking about grabbing gay guys by the neck. And then also, just listen to him describe here how much he hates having sex with women.
I don't give a shit about having sex with beautiful women. I them so they listen to me, so I can get what I actually want, which is not them. I have met beautiful women with a good personality and thought she will make me money. I have to this bitch. I don't want to have sex with her. I just need the money.
If you have no chance of having a child from the sex, that's as gay as sex can be. Now, not many people know you can have gay sex with a woman.
Yeah, so it sounds like he's not enjoying having sex with these women. And he's also saying it's just a way for him to get what he wants. And it seems like what he wants is attention from other men. It seems like his entire existence is just trying to get validation from dudes. So I think Andrew Tate is just very confused. And he clearly just uses women. And I'm sure he's doing the same thing with Candace Owens. Like, she's obviously just a useful idiot to him. He doesn't respect women. He doesn't think very highly of them. So what makes you think he would treat Candace any different? I mean, she's pretty much just his PR agent at this point, and also somebody to promote Hustlers University. Like, in the middle of both of her podcasts, like the one with Andrew and Tristan, she just started going on a rant about how amazing Hustlers University is. I mean, she spent like 6 or 7 minutes promoting it and talking about how great it is, which was hilarious. And it sounded like she was doing a sales pitch. She's like, why go to college and spend 6 figures when Hustlers University is only $49.99 and you can learn so much more? And I'm not like saying college is the best option for everybody, but to try to shill Hustlers University and act like that's something legit is just embarrassing. And again, like everything else she's been doing for the Tates, it makes you wonder, why would she want to do this?
I had not even realized how successful Hustler University was. It's a full disruption to traditional education system that most kids can afford and don't need to go into 6-figure debt for because it's $49.99 for a course. And I actually hired someone not realizing they were a Hustler University graduate and they've been an incredible employee.
Yes.
And this is a person from the wrong side of the tracks who now has an opportunity and he's learning how to make money in this world. And he's not doing it because he has to first figure out how to pay all of these debts like I did with student loans. And then you have these two brothers and they're embodying the family, and they're speaking about traditional masculinity, like, you know, I'll beat you in a fight. So crazy. So there was this person who was doing like a bunch of digital content. I thought his content was amazing, got into touch. And I'm like, dude, you're a hustler. You're a hustler. Like, where did you learn how to do all of this stuff? Like, I'm going to hire you. I'm like, what school did you go to? Harvard, Columbia, Hustler University. I said, excuse me? What's hustler? I went to Andrew Tate's school and I learned how to do all of these. I mean, this kid is going to make a killing. I mean, I'm telling you, he's going to make an absolute killing. It's like around the clock, work.
Yeah.
Comes from the wrong side of the tracks. I figure out, hired him. One of the greatest hires that I've had, like unbelievably. Amazing. And so are jumping into, I genuinely don't even know what Hustler University is, but I know that kid is 10 times more effective than people that are coming out of with college degrees right now. As I was looking for somebody, he is a hustler, like literally is a hustler.
Yeah, so Candace Owens is just delusional, or being paid, or being manipulated, or being blackmailed, or all the above. You know, I think that's probably the most likely. But it's just hilarious that Candace is telling her fans to go buy a course from the same guy who was just selling a course not too long ago on how to pimp out girls. If you remember, Tate used to sell a course like that, and he said he had his PhD, his pimp and hose degree. I mean, Tate is also just a cringe fest.
And that is PhD is pimp and hose degree that I'm
Clever.
Like, the guy's just embarrassing. But now it'll be interesting to see if he takes down Candace Owens with him. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And then make sure you go check out my Patreon account if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it and hear about a lot of crazy stories and stuff that people aren't talking about. You know, I'm sure most people weren't that familiar with everything going on here. So if you want to stay up to date on everything, that's the best way to do it. And there are already over 90 videos on there, so there's a ton of stuff to go through. Make sure you check it out. Put a link in the description.